was hoping to have Jacqueline give me an introduction, but I'm going to tell you myself. My name is Heidi Swan, and I'm the co-author of a young adult novella entitled A Night in Jail. I co-wrote it with my brother, and we wrote it as half fiction and half non-fiction. It's inspired by his true life, and the purpose of the book was to bring awareness to the association between teen marijuana use and schizophrenia. And last month we had, or excuse me, it was January, we had a staged reading of it at Miracosta, and it was a huge success, and we had a standing ovation. And so I'm really, really pleased to be here talking to you about it, and hope that we can have dialogue while this continues. I was 12 when I first started drinking and smoking pot. That was pretty normal in the Pacific Northwest where I grew up. One time when I was getting high with one of my best friends in the laundry room of my house, I couldn't remember where I was, and I couldn't remember who she was, and then I'd remember, and then I'd forget, and then I'd remember, and I'd forget, and this went on for a long time, and it was so frightening. And I just thought it was what happened. It was just a bad trip. It wasn't until recently that I found out that there's actually a term for it, and that is cannabis-induced psychosis. So that's basically where a person who has had too much THC loses touch with reality. Pot was not my favorite thing to do, so I really didn't smoke it a lot, but it was my brother's favorite thing to do. He smoked just a little bit every day for about a decade. And even though he was doing this every day, it didn't define who he was as a person. He was ambitious, he was funny, he had friends, he played basketball, he had girlfriends, and lots of great things in his life. And we went on family vacations. He came from a loving home, we both did. But pretty much everything that could go wrong with a teenager smoking pot on a regular basis did go wrong for him. In college and graduate school, he wasn't able to study as well as he could in the past. He finished in the bottom third of his class in graduate school. And then after he graduated, he had to take the test so that he could practice in his field, and he failed 3 times. So he wasn't able to use his 7 years of higher education to get a job. What he did have was a raging addiction to marijuana. And as with a lot of people who become addicted to marijuana, it eventually becomes boring. And so he moved on to cocaine, and then crack, and then in short order he was homeless and living underneath a freeway, and he went to jail 18 times. I'm happy to report today that he's doing well. He's sober, he's medicated, he's off the streets, and he's happier than he's been in about 50 years. Getting him to this place was not an easy thing to do. In fact, it was a pretty arduous task, and if you care to read about it, it's on our website, anightinjail.com. So I really wanted to know when he got off the streets and when he was medicated. I want to know what was going on in his mind when he was living on the streets. And so he and I started having conversations about his experiences. And what he told me was that he was living outside because he thought he was John the Baptist. And he lived underneath a freeway overpass because he was hiding from the CIA. That is schizophrenia. At the same time as he was telling me these stories, I started seeing studies which showed a relationship between teen cannabis use and adult schizophrenia. And I was like, wow, did that really sounds like you, and he agreed with me. And so we decided that we would write a book together so that we could warn teenagers about what we wish we knew when we were teenagers, that using marijuana as a young person carries some serious risks to it. So, since the time I started writing the book with them, several years have passed, and the reason for the book has become only more important. And so, can anyone tell me why that would be?
The legalization of marijuana.
Legalization, yes. Ava?
That's what I was gonna say.
Absolutely. And what about the THC strength?
What's going on?
It's gone up. So when my brother and I were smoking pot, the THC content, which is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, it was 5% THC. The THC content today is several times that, 25, 30%. The vape pens, the oils you can get in that are up to 90% THC, and that's, again, the psychoactive ingredient, the thing that can cause a person to lose touch with reality. Well, some people say, why should I care? I don't smoke pot, I don't use THC products, why do I care what other people do? Live and let live, right? Well, I'm going to tell you why we all need to care about what people around us are doing, especially with regards to THC. One of them is marijuana impaired driving. Traffic fatalities have risen drastically in states where it's legalized. It's almost doubled in Washington State and Colorado. A lot of people think, well, I have a medical marijuana card, so it's medicine, so I can take it. No, it is still impaired driving, and that endangers everybody on the streets. The cost to society, even though you say, oh, we're getting some tax revenue from it, there's a lot of homeless people, because schizophrenia can lead to homelessness and jail time. Violence. People who are psychotic are several times more likely to be violent. Crime. In neighborhoods where there are marijuana dispensaries, crime rates have risen. And lastly, with legalization, people are thinking more and more that it's safe. Therefore, more people are using. So about a week or so ago, my friend Jacqueline pointed out to me that Redondo Union High School published their newspaper, and it had a lot of information about marijuana. And one of the things that they talked about was its relationship to schizophrenia and psychosis, hallucinations, paranoia. And I was so impressed because for so long, there's only been a few people going around and talking about that, including myself, and people have looked at me like I'm making it up, and I'm not. And so to see it in print in a high school newspaper, I was just so happy to see that. And they also reported on the developing brain, why it's so important that people whose brains aren't finished developing stay away from marijuana. And so I'm sure you all know this part. At what age does the brain stop developing?
30?
25 or 30, exactly. We didn't know this years ago. I mean, this is only new information over the last decade. And so, that, I was really impressed that they had this in their articles. And so one of the other things was they talked about marijuana legalization and the prevailing beliefs about legalization, and which is going to spread across our whole country. And so I'm going to throw out some of these ideas, and raise your hand if you agree with them. Marijuana as a medicine has less dangerous side effects than other drugs. Nobody? Legalization is good for states because it brings in tax revenue. safer than alcohol. Legalization at the federal level will bring social justice to minorities who are being unfairly targeted, reduce crime, and get rid of the black market drug sales. Teens won't have easier access with legalization. So are you familiar with your friends getting marijuana? Yeah. It lowers anxiety and helps with several forms of depression and mental illness. So a lot of those statements have turned out statistically to be false. So here's what struck me about those beliefs also is, do you see how those encourage use? They normalize it. They make it seem like, oh, this is acceptable, this is fine, we can try it. So where do you think these claims are coming from? Because there's 30 years worth of science which basically say that that's not the case. But where could these claims be coming from? Who would put out this kind of misinformation that would make people think a substance is safe to use when in fact, yes?
Marijuana dispensaries?
Yes, and who else?
Commercialized vaping industries.
Yes, and
Well, I was gonna say, and Democrats
Democrats.
that are for the legalization.
I have to agree. I agree, and I'm a Democrat, and I absolutely agree with you. So guess who's behind big marijuana and the dispensaries and the vape manufacturers? Guess who's a big investor in them?
Big corporate companies or
Yes.
politicians?
Yes, but,
Okay.
yes, it's big tobacco. Philip Morris and Altria are invested heavily in big marijuana. In last month on NBC.com, it said Philip Morris and Altria invested sums in marijuana companies so large that it ends any fiction that tobacco and cannabis are separate industries. Now remember, big tobacco is the one who told us that cigarettes don't cause cancer. And remember, it took a long, long time before they were brought to justice and before they admitted that they knew this, that it did cause cancer. They knew all about this and they weren't saying anything. And so they made big profits in the meanwhile before they were brought to justice. And so now that they are partnered with marijuana, they are doing the exact same thing. So they are contributing to the misinformation that's being spread to all of you. They're minimizing risks. They're saying, oh, that stuff about mental illness? No, there's not enough studies on that. There's 30 years worth of studies on it, but they minimize it and they say, oh no, it's we don't market to kids and it's safe, but we're finding out the other thing is true. So like the alcohol industry, big tobacco and big marijuana are following a business model which is time-honored and very successful, and it is called addiction for profit. Part of the addiction for profit industry is that they need to get teenagers hooked. And so who can tell me why they need teenagers hooked?
Because these are dangerous products and they know the older people are probably not gonna live that long.
Well, that's a good idea.
Teens are easy to target and they're easy to manipulate.
Yes.
They're gonna be future consumers of the products.
Yes, because why?
Because they're already addicted.
You generate
Yes.
more profit long term.
Yes. And so excellent. So the teenage brain, a young brain, under the age of 21 especially, you guys know how fast you run things. Things just go quick for you. You know how your parents are turning and saying, look at my phone, will you help me with my phone? Because you know how to do things much faster than we do. addiction is a form of learning. And so if a teenager is using a substance, then while the brain is still forming, it becomes a part of the brain's formation in the end. And so it sets the pathways along with your brain's growth. And so a teenager then who gets addicted to a substance has a harder time shedding that addiction over the course of a lifetime. Teenagers get addicted to anything faster, stronger, harder, and longer than adults do. And they know this. And so if they can get you hooked at a young age, then they have a very good chance of keeping you as a customer for the rest of your life, coming back and using their products again and again. In fact, that's the addiction for profit business model, is that their greatest profits come from the small percentage of people who are addicts. It's not the responsible drinkers or responsible smokers, it's the people who can't stop using. So let's talk about teenagers having easier access. You all agree, you know people are getting access to it, even though they say, well, we're not marketing to teens and teens aren't gonna get it. Well, they are. And Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which is a nonpartisan organization, and they are for decriminalizing marijuana, but they feel like there's a not necessarily full-on legalization. Anyway, what they want to do is follow science and have the science dictate the laws and not have it be the way that it is right now, where the laws are kind of ahead of the science, where this is happening and now we're all jumping to try to figure out how to make it work. And so Smart Approaches to Marijuana says young adult use has been skyrocketing, especially in legalized states, and additionally, marijuana-related emergency room visits by Colorado teens has been on the rise since legalization. As far as marijuana not having any dangerous side effects like other drugs, like I said, there's a potential for a person using THC to acquire a serious mental illness like schizophrenia and psychosis, and that is a huge risk because these are things you don't get over. I think 50% of people who become schizophrenic can get over it, but that's only 50%. One of the things that I do is an AMA. You guys know what AMAs are? Ask me anything. Okay, so it's on an iPhone app, and I can post on it. I can say, hey, ask me anything about whatever. And mine are always on addiction and mental illness because that's my cause. And so I did an AMA last November, and I had a really wonderful guest. His name is Dr. Daniele Piamelli, and he's at UC Irvine, and he's the director for the study of cannabis there. And before that, more importantly, he was a member of the National Academy of Sciences. And what they did, this was a 16 or 17 group member, I can't remember which, that they reviewed 10,000 scientific artifacts related to marijuana use. And what did they find out of these 10,000? And I heard him on NPR one time, and he had said, oh, it's so dangerous for teens, we can't even say that there's a safe level. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to meet this guy. And so I called him, and I emailed him, and finally he agreed to see me. And so I came down, and I met him during his lunch hour, and I brought him lunch. And we were sitting there, and he said, yes, so we studied all of these documents. And I said, yes, and what did you find? And he said, well, we don't know anything. I was like, okay, did I just drive to Irvine and bring lunch, to this guy for he doesn't know anything? And he said, there was one thing that we all agreed on, because there was so much conflicting information. Some said it caused depression, some said it didn't cause depression, some said it ruined kids' IQs, other people said, well, it actually helped them. He said, but the one thing that we all agreed on was that teen marijuana use was very strongly associated with schizophrenia. Okay, it wasn't always true, it was good, and so we got that, it's on tape, and if you care to see him, he's on our website, nightingale.com, under menu item AMAs. I've done 11 AMAs so far, and he's one of them, and he's terrific. So, but there are other neuroscientists who do say that they know of other associations to mental illness. So for instance, Frances Jensen, who's the author of The Teenage Brain, and she says that if a teenager uses marijuana, they can damage the pathways in their brain and create a higher risk for depression and anxiety. The Warwick School of Medicine out of the United Kingdom published the first ever study of its kind in 2017, which said teen marijuana use is associated with bipolar disorder, and that's taking away every other factor in a person's life. If you just use marijuana, you've raised your risk for bipolar disorder. And let me say right here that one of the really scary things about teen marijuana use and its association with mental illness is that a teenager can feel perfectly fine for years and quit. And years later, that's when the mental illness starts. So that makes it especially dangerous because people say, well, I feel fine. Everything's fine. And then later, it kicks in. Additionally, one of the problems with teen marijuana use is that it can lead to suicide. One of the really grim statistics on it is that the Colorado Department of Health says that their data from 2013 to 2017 shows that the substance most often found in teenagers, 10 to 19-year-olds, the most used substance was marijuana. That's in their toxicology reports. That's after they already died. And the National Academy of Sciences, the one that Dr. Daniele Piavelli was in, they also said heavy users of cannabis are more likely to report thoughts of suicide than non-cannabis users. I have a friend named Lori Robinson, and she had a beautiful son. His name is Shane. And the only drug that Shane ever used was THC, and he used it because he had knee surgery, and the medicines were just too intense for him. And so he was using marijuana, and he became so psychotic, he thought that he had to save Barack Obama. And they were driving down the freeway, and he tried to jump out of the car. And after a second psychotic break, he ended up killing himself. Now that's only one person's story, but there's actually a lot of stories like this. And they are in a book that came out in January, just 2 months ago, and it's a bestseller, and it's called Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana, Mental Illness, and Violence. And it talks about the psychosis. The theme is cannabis causes psychosis, and psychosis, people in psychosis are many times more likely to be violent. That's violent to themselves and violent to other people. And so on his, the author's Twitter page, he said just a couple of weeks ago that since January 26th, this is last January, at least 4 multiple mass killers have had a publicly recorded cannabis mental illness connection. Dakota Thoreau, this is the guy in Louisiana who killed his parents and his girlfriend and her parents. He was a heavy user of marijuana and psychotic. Gary Martin, this is the guy in Chicago who was getting fired from his job, and he killed the people there. He was a regular marijuana user. Camden Nicholson, this is the one in Newport Beach who killed his parents and his housekeeper. And then lastly, there was a guy out of the United Kingdom who killed 3 people there, and he was a guy who was campaigning for legal cannabis. That was between between January 26th and the end of February, just those cases. Other than increased mental illnesses, there are some other side effects to keep in mind. And one of them is a new syndrome called scromiting. Has anybody heard of that? That's screaming and vomiting. And so that's a sign of a THC overdose. And so the Daily Mail says scromiting is becoming an all too familiar sight in emergency rooms. And Snopes says an increase in documented cases of people scromiting, screaming and vomiting is linked to chronic heavy marijuana use. So if you have a friend who's doing that, there's nothing to be done except that they can go and take a warm shower. This won't kill them and it won't hurt them, it's just gonna take a long time for it to pass. Worse, the data from 2009 to 2015 in Colorado shows hospitalizations related to marijuana have more than tripled since commercialization, and it's doubled since legalization. One other unexpected health danger, especially in California, and especially since we're legalized, is that there was an expose from NBCLA. They went to several pot dispensaries and tested the marijuana, and they found a whole bunch of banned chemicals, mold, poison, mildew, E. coli, on these products from dispensaries. There is apparently 170 licensed cannabis dispensaries in Southern California. There's also 350 unlicensed dispensaries. So NBCLA went to them and went to a couple and they said, "Are you licensed?" And they said yes. And they said, "Are your products pesticide free?" They said yes. Both of those things turned out to be untrue. On top of that, Vice did a report on the labs who are the third-party testers of these products, and they found out that this lab in particular didn't do it, but they talked about other growers who are saying, "Hey, can you help me with my THC level? It's supposed to be 8%, but it's really 20%. Can you fix that for me?" Meaning, change it for me. And also, can you help me with the chemicals on it as well? And so that seems to be a common practice, that some of these growers are not being honest, and they're trying to get the labs to go along with them. And so this is a very disconcerting thing. I thought that legalization was supposed to protect us from things like this. So the final study I will discuss is a different way of looking at the issues of brain health and its relationship to marijuana. There was the first ever study of its kind done in 2018 by Daniel Amen of the Amen Clinics. And what he wanted to do was to discover what are the main drivers of accelerated aging and of the brain. And when we're talking about accelerated aging, I mean dementia and Alzheimer's. And they found that there were some syndromes and there were some environmental factors that contributed to it. The number one ager of the brain is schizophrenia. The number two ager of the brain is cannabis. Alcohol abuse was a distant fifth. So that should answer the question, is it safer than alcohol? Because what the brain looks like when it's deteriorating is it gets smaller and it gets little holes in it, and you want it to be as big and fleshy as it can be. Alcohol hurts the liver, but marijuana affects the brain. So I will leave you with final thoughts about why we should all care about other people who are using marijuana if we're not the ones ones using it. One of the unintended consequences of legalization is that there's been an increase in people filing for Social Security benefits. And the surprising thing about that is that the people filing for these Social Security benefits and disability benefits are ages 23 to 40. That's very young. 23 to 40 are the people we need paying into Social Security, not trying to get money from Social Security. Additionally, workman's comp claims have gone up as well. So at the age of 59, my brother has been supported by Social Security disability for 6 years. Before that, he was in jail 18 times. He had treatment for his hepatitis C that he acquired sometime in his years on the streets, and that cost over $100,000. So this is a really good example, my brother, of how addiction and mental illness will prevent a person from working, which then shifts the cost of this afflicted person's living expenses onto the taxpayers. So with a surge in teenage use using these high potency products, there could be more people acquiring this serious mental illness, due in part to the use of high potency THC. And like my brother, some of these teenagers will grow up to become destitute, possibly homeless, possibly in need of social services, which we will all pay for. And the tax revenues from cannabis can never come close to covering those costs. But then remember, who's reaping the benefits of this addiction? Who is winning when people are that addicted? The human cost is the one that we all pay for in tears and in heartache. Whether it be a friend or a family member, because as we know, use is rising and continuing. And if it continues as it is, then eventually this pain could be felt not just by me and my brother, but by everyone here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was great. It was very informative. Thank you very much. The stats were fantastic.
Can I
I'm
say
sorry?
something? I'm
Yes.
sorry, all my references I have on a PDF that I'll send to you,
Right.
and so that you can all get it and look up the references yourself. So,
Do you guys have any questions for her?
Question, yeah.
I'm sorry, would you be available for any questions?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming and presenting. Obviously, it's a very difficult circumstance that you've been in. It's really nice to see that you turned it around and created such a positive future for people that you convinced to no longer use marijuana. But I just have a couple questions. My first question is, how do you plan on inspiring students to not only agree with you, but to actually change their habit of using marijuana?
Well, I think just information, just letting people know, because as I was saying, the prevailing beliefs are, it's like, I think most people, some of you agreed it was safer than alcohol, and so that's just trying to educate, because the prevailing beliefs across the country are, it's fine, it's safe, it's harmless, it's good for you, it's medicine, and to say, actually, it's not. And even though if some people say, oh, it's not for sure, well, isn't the risk, isn't the fact that there are all these studies out there enough to make you say, well, maybe I don't want to take a chance with this one brain I have? And let's wait until the full-on studies come in, you know? Because there's no harm in waiting, actually. What do we miss if we don't use? really, we've lost some friends, but we're gonna change friends over and over again in our lives. I'm 55 and I've gone through several changes of friends since high school, But what I did to my brain when I was 12 and 13 and 14 and 15, I believe I'm still suffering the consequences now because I have anxiety and it's ebbed and flowed in my life. And is it because I smoked pot when I was a teenager? I may never know, but looking at the research over the last 30 years, I can see that it did not help me one bit. So, yes, so just basically educating. And then also with the book I wrote, it's not like this at all. It's not me talking all the way through it. There's a plot, there's a couple of people in a jail cell, and you wonder what's going on, and there's a lot of tension, and so it's a fictional story, and you get the lesson at the end. It's a completely different experience, because it's not easy to get people to sit and listen to, yes, thank you. And did you have another question?
Yes, I have a second question. So most likely you're aware of this, but marijuana is legal in some states, but technically still a federal crime.
Yeah.
And yet, in order for the Supreme Court to address this contradiction, there's a whole process through the courts, from the lower courts to the higher courts, yes? So I was wondering if you've ever considered an approach of planning sort of a pseudo-event in order to get this into the courts and do the process.
So like this?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. I've never considered that.
Okay.
If anybody has any ideas, I would be enthusiastic about that.
I'll think of something.
Yeah, that would be fun.
I have a question. Why have the marijuana industry increased the amount of THC in their products?
That is, it's because the consumers like getting really stoned. And so and the interesting thing is people are talking about, oh, it's natural, it's herb, it is anything but natural. You can't even get the marijuana that I was smoking, the 5% THC anymore. I don't even think they have the seeds anymore to make it. I think like the lowest you can get is like 18%. But when we're talking about the butane hash that's been, that's been way processed, and people are lighting it with a torch. Have you seen this? People light themselves on fire doing this. It's terrible. So, wait, what was your question?
Why did the marijuana industry increase the amount of THC in their products?
Well, one, people wanted it, and two, it gets people addicted faster. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Is it right?
Hmm?
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Gene.
Uh,
It's my friend Jean from the gym.
Jean
She's
from
one of
the
my
gym.
gym buddies.
So, as a young community of future leaders, this is addressed to you, our panel, your panel. How many of you have ever, you all watch TV, you all watch violent movies and stuff like that. So my question is kind of based on, when does understanding something become realization? Like, have any of you ever seen somebody die right in front of you over something like this? When does a community tragedy warrant action by community members, hence young leaders like yourself? Interesting subject, right? Next thing is, who knows what a metric is? Sanchez, Diego, have any idea what a metric is?
I know what a metric system is.
Metrics are big company analysis tools. It's the something per something per something chart that they show that says, hey, look, this is the trend line, this is what we need to pour into this to make that go up. Or we need to drive down this, right? Those are metrics, company metrics, right? Project engineering, programs management, all that stuff. Heidi alluded to big tobacco. Why is big tobacco so into this, right? give you an example of metrics. How many people know people that are overweight, that are heavy, right? Or that drink too much? And what's the one thing that everybody wants them to do? They want them to stop, right? And then they land up, those people that try to lose weight, they get skinny, and then all of a sudden, a year later, they're twice as big as what they were. And that's exactly what's behind big tobacco as well. If you look at, they do studies. The end goal of a study is a series of metrics. Big tobacco companies want you to quit smoking. They implore, they had all those TV commercials, those are backed by big tobacco companies. Why is that?
He'll be back.
Because when you come back, you land up smoking twice as much. That's what the studies show. Addiction, why is the THC content now so much higher? The path to addiction is that much faster. So community actions, what's it going to take? You, Ms. Major, you asked Heidi, what are you going to do? You know, what's it going to take for this young community of future leaders to be able to, I'm sorry?
Taxing. I mean, they already have a
No,
cigarette.
what's the fear?
Taxing
What's
isn't
the
it?
fear threshold? What's that hammer, the frying pan that's going to say, hey, look, we're a young community and we're not going to put up with this anymore. Where's the action that can be taken in the school? You as those leaders, you know, you see your friends. And, you know, what's it going to take for that one thing to happen? And you say, oh my God, this is, everything that Heidi said is true. It's forthcoming. What are we going to do as a community to stamp it out? What a great community class project to do. I think that's a great opportunity, and I am really happy to be here in front of my friend Heidi, who has created such a wonderful opportunity to bring this awareness to a community that I see, a board, a panel here that I am very, very impressed with. I look to you to answer your questions about this going forward and leading your friends, your community in the future to something that works, something that you can all be proud of, and you say, hey, look, this is a problem in our community. And did you see what happened to so-and-so? So-and-so got in an accident, they were killed, you know, that's going to happen, it's inevitable. In your life, it's inevitable. What a great opportunity Heidi is trying to bring to this class, to this community, to bring the visibility so that you can start to answer those questions. And you can start to ask those questions amongst yourself and create some leadership path, some steering committee to community betterment, because this is a wonderful community. It's one of the best communities in the world. I've lived a lot of places in the world. This is a great, great community, and what is happening is creeping up on all of us, and it is going to affect all of us, even those that don't have anything to do with it. So just some things to think about. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank
One
you.
thing I wanted to mention about taxes, so there was our report, what we got in California in taxes so far on marijuana has turned out to be 1/3 of what they promised. And the fourth quarter results are even worse. And in Colorado, their taxes are 0.9%. That's what the marijuana tax revenue is. And their former pot czar said, nobody legalizes marijuana for taxes because it's a drop in the bucket and it's not going to do anything. That's just a red herring. The guy from Normal, I can't remember his name, said in the 1970s, we're going to legalize it for medicinal use, and that will be our backdoor in. So the medical marijuana is a little bit of a ruse, and then what we're gaining in taxes is nothing compared to, like, say, traffic fatalities, or the emergency room visits by people who don't have insurance, the hospitalizations of people who don't have insurance, and they're scromiting, or they're having psychotic breaks, and other things, and poisoning. Kids are getting a hold of the gummy bears. and they're having, you know, overdoses on these edibles quite accidentally. It happened a couple of times recently in Ohio. So, anyway, that's what I would say when you say taxes. I was like, just so you know, the social costs are way outweighing whatever's coming in taxes.
I have another question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you and your brother present to schools. I was wondering the approximate age that you usually present to.
I think 12 and up, but I think it should be earlier, frankly, because kids are being busted in middle school. 11-year-olds are being caught with vape pens at school. I don't think that's surprising any one of you. So I think we've got to get to them early, before, because if they don't know about this and they're at middle school and they see a 7th grader or a 6th grader with a vape pen, and the guy goes, oh, it's no big deal, it tastes like strawberry, and he hands it to him, and this kid has just interrupted a lot of the formation of what his brain needs to do. That's really dangerous, because, as Dr. Daniele Piamelli said, and I don't think I said it tonight, I'm sorry, but the risks are the younger a person is when they start, the more frequently they use, the higher the potency of THC, the greater the risk. And if you have a genetic predisposition, like I do, like my brother does, that raises the risks even higher. Now, 10% of the population is predisposed, and most of us don't know it. So that's the really big danger. Is people can say, oh, it's fine, I can do it, and they might be the one person in their family who got the gene from the uncle, where their brother and sisters might be fine. So, yeah, so I think we should really get to kids way before. Yeah.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to present to any other like schools? Because I think what you're doing is really great, and you have like all the facts that a lot of people don't know, which I think will help kind of stop the use of marijuana, especially from teenagers.
I would love to. I haven't been invited yet, but I can make phone calls. And if you want to make a suggestion, and you know, Louise has my contact information, I'd be more than happy to. And I would love it if anybody read my book. It's at the Redondo Library. There's a couple copies there, and they're online, because it's a completely different approach to this. It's hopefully a lot more entertaining. And as a theatrical piece, it was very, very successful. And so, in fact, we're thinking about doing another staged reading of it at the Hermosa Community Center in the next upcoming months. And yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that vote of confidence.
I think you should come to RUHS and present just you know.
Well, we got to talk then to, who do we talk to then? Jens Brandt or Megan Schooler?
I think so.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Brian Inez, I'm on the vaping council. There's a vaping council now at RUHS. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's brand new, so we're hopefully going to be able to do things like that. But if you wanted to let them know that you heard me speak and thought it would be good to speak there, that's probably the best endorsement they can hear. Because I did say, I sent them an email, said, hey, I'm going to be speaking there. I don't expect you to come because you guys all keep long hours, just like the students. But just wanted to let them know. So I'd be thrilled too. Thrilled.
And I think especially with your story, I mean, it resonates with a lot of teenagers, and they can see how someone is affected with it, which will make them understand, like, oh, this really is a problem. She's not just trying to, you know, come in and stop us from using drugs, but you actually understand.
Yeah. It happened to me. And the other story, if I can tell you one other story, and this is a really good illustration of what can happen when a person is in a psychotic state. There was a girl, 15 or 16-year-old girl up in Mono County last October who was out getting high with her friends. And her stepmom brought her home, and she noticed the girl was so freaked out and paranoid and completely detached from reality. And the stepmom was super worried about her, so she just kept checking on her all night long. And one time at 5 o'clock in the morning, she walked in and the girl was lying there with her eyes wide open, and she was like, oh geez, just, I'm here. And then when she got up a couple hours later, the girl was gone. And neighbors said that they saw her walking down the street in her sweatpants and without her shoes. She's never been found. She was so completely out of her mind, she was fleeing from who knows what. And so that's the real danger. There was also an article by a 30-year-old woman who had ate half a gummy bear. Her friend ate one half and she gave her the other half. And the next thing she knew, she felt like she was screaming and felt like she was dying, and she doesn't remember if this was a hallucination or if it actually happened, but she was running down the street and saying, I'm dying, and then they put her in an ambulance, and there were dead people running past, being dragged past her, and they brought her to the hospital, and her friend was there next to her, who was perfectly fine, but she has no idea what was real and what was a hallucination. And this is a young woman, a 30-year-old woman with no history of mental illness, none. And that was published in a Vancouver, Canada publication. So, I mean, we just have to be aware that who it can happen to, we just don't know. There's no way to know until it happens.
Okay, well, thank you for providing this information. We'll follow up definitely on that, and hopefully we'll get you to talk at Redondo also.
Yeah, that'd be
We'll
fine.
go ahead and move forward, and I'll contact,
That'd be amazing.
yeah, we'll see what we can do to make it happen too.
That'd be great.
All right, do you guys have any more questions for her?
Well,
If you guys think of any more questions, I can always, you have your AMAs, ask me anything, sessions.
Those are all I've got.
So if you guys have any more questions you think of, be happy to forward that to her also, and so that way she can answer whatever question. You may have a question later on tonight, you may think of something that I should have asked that. We can forward those questions and have her respond to you too. All right? All right, well, thank you very
all
much.
so much.
All right, one more time for